Hello and welcome back to the final of these Doctor Who episodes ranking for each Doctor. We did 1 through to 7. We have now done 9 through to 12 and finally 13. And I need to be honest with you, this is the only video that required actual homework on my part. Because in the last few weeks, I rewatched the 13th Doctor's era because I'd only seen most of it once. Which I know I've only seen Classic Who once in its entirety. But I kind of felt better versed talking about that than I did about this because New Who I have seen so many times. I've seen all the episodes so many times that I feel very fluent in talking about them, which has kind of made the videos a lot longer than they need to be. But I then did to do the 13th Doctor one, I felt like I really needed to do some research. So I rewatched it and I kind of like it more than I did. Now, I am not a huge fan of this era. I'm not a huge fan of this Doctor, these companions, the tone, the setting, and definitely not the Timeless Child arc. So I've not softened completely on this. But there are episodes that I now have a much higher appreciation of. I have a much higher appreciation of Rosa, for example, than I used to. But in the same vein, there are episodes that I have a lower appreciation value of, such as Fugitive of the Jedu, because sometimes a rewatch can help an episode, but sometimes if the key mystery is already gone from an episode, that can be an immediate detracting factor. So I've watched Series 11 3 times now, Series 12 twice, so I feel like I'm well versed enough to start talking about this. Beginning with the woman who fell to Earth, which, where's my mouse? There it is. The Woman Who Fell to Earth is okay. Some elements of the score are all right. The companions are okay. They're actually doing all right. The biggest attraction in this episode is actually the plot and the villain, which is kind of pointless. Simsha is just such a weak villain and begins this era's real villain problem. I actually think Jodie Whittaker's pretty good in this one, quite Doctor-like, maybe a little bit overly familiar, but hey, it's a regeneration episode. You can get away with stuff like that. Yaz, we actually see as a police officer. We get to see Graham and Ryan, and some of the emotional and character stuff that's done with regards to Grace's death and the Doctor talking about her own family and her own experience, and Graham talking about his cancer. All of that stuff is actually really well done. It does feel very fresh and very new and very vibrant. It's not a particularly good episode, but it is okay and it is watchable. There is some stuff that could have been cut and could have been skipped to make it a tighter all-round episode thing. But yeah, it's okay. I don't mind this one. The Ghost Monument is bad. Honestly, the Ghost Monument, the first 10 minutes of this story is so good. The cinematography is incredible. There's the crashing spaceship sequence. There's an interesting idea of these two characters on a space race. But as soon as we actually land on the planet named Desolation, it just goes to flipping pot and just becomes so boring. And that's the biggest crime. And sometimes that is a big crime in this era, that the plots aren't actually bad. There's nothing objectively wrong with the idea on paper for the episode The Ghost Monument. It's just as soon as we get that opening 10 minutes, which is actually quite action-packed out of the way, we literally slow to a walking pace. And this big, super confident space race is just all of us walking through the desert together and encountering different things. Now, it's very Terry Nation anthology-style story, like The Chase or Keys and Marinus, but it's much more Keys and Marinus than it is The Chase. In terms of we go to all these, we're going to a very specific location, and on the way we're meeting these different obstacles. But the obstacles are just so boring. We spend so much time just like asleep on a boat, or talking on a boat, or talking whilst walking. And there's a lot of stuff that we just like hear about, but it's not even really a problem. The boat's broke, so Ryan and Graham fix it. You're on an alien planet, you can't fix the boat. There's just some stuff like that. It's just so stupid. And I think that the ending is a cop-out, but I do love the 13th Doctor finally getting to see her Ghost Monument. That's a nice little scene at the end, even though this TARDIS design, particularly in Series 11, because it looks much better in Series 12, but particularly in Series 11, looks atrociously bad. Really not a clue what motivated them to do that. Rosa, let's have a bit of positivity. Good. I really did enjoy Rosa this time. Interesting attempt to do a historical figure in this way, where they're just Operation Rosa Parks, where they're just protecting history. The only reason it's not in the great column is that the villain Krasko is weak and underdeveloped, and no one really bothers the fact that Ryan basically straight up kills him at the end. That's just maybe something I just noticed, and I was like, what? Why does no one care about that? Why is this 13th Doctor, who is so morally superior to everyone, and very happy to share why, so okay with Ryan killing Krasko? There are problems like that, and it's not a perfect story, but it's a brave attempt to write an interesting historical story. And honestly, this era's constant strengths are its historical stories. Of my top 6, 4 of them are historicals. And I think that says everything about when this era was doing historicals. It does them really well. It puts a lot of effort into the background, into the world building. It actually depicts a very racist society in quite a lot of detail, and makes it seem quite vile and volatile for our diverse cast of characters. We get to see the impact of that racism on them. I also like that they evaluate the character of Jimmy Blake, and they sort of deconstruct this idea that he always maintained later on in his life that, you know, it wasn't fair, but it was the law, and he was just doing his job. That is the oldest defense in the book. That's the defense the Nazis used at the war crimes trials, that just doing our jobs. And just sort of deconstructing that and showing that he was not a nice person. He was a horrible racist, and that's not a valid defense. And the scene at the end with Rosa getting taken away is really brilliantly done. And I love Graham's face and the horror on his face that he's part of events. Yeah, I think it's a really good story. The first really good one of this era. Unfortunately, it comes before. Yeah, okay, that's just Ireland in the UK is awful. Really, really terrible story. The plot itself makes no sense. The spiders are not scary. It's shot in the dullest way possible. There is no attempt to do anything interesting with the spiders. The spiders are not threatening. The only way you could be scared of this is if you are already scared of spiders. And as I'm not, then it's not a problem. I'm not scared of spiders. I do not have arachnophobia. But giant spiders in Lord of the Rings with Shelob, in The Hobbit, in Harry Potter with Aragog, when they are done, they can be made scary, but it all depends on how you shoot it and the amount of effect that they have. Because these are just ordinary garden spiders, they have no real effect. This is basically just a knockoff rubbish Green Death. You know, there's a big corporation who are trying to cut some corners by filling in abandoned mines with landfill, causing creatures, in Green Death's case, maggots, in this case, spiders, to become much bigger than they should be. That's the entire plot. It is just a knockoff of the Green Death, which is a vastly superior story. Everyone is at their worst. I think Graham and Gray stuff's okay. Ryan's at his dullest. Yaz, his family are just generic. 13's at her worst. We have an entirely huge support cast. The Donald Trump parody of Jack Robertson is almost embarrassing to watch. The plot resolution is cringy and highly immoral. The 13th Doctor shouting at Jack Robertson for shooting thing. She lures them into his panic room and locks them in, where they will either suffocate or eat each other, cannibalize each other, or they'll all just keep growing until they're too big, and they will crush their joints in together. And that's what she calls the dignified way. The least we can do is give them a dignified death. There is nothing dignified about that whatsoever. And it really annoys me. That plot ending really, really winds me up. I just feel this was a mistake in terms of production, in terms of absolutely everything. This was just a mistake of an episode. Saranga Conundrum. Not as bad as it happens in the UK, or worse. I'll say not as bad. I'll say not. The Saranga Conundrum has a arguably larger crime than Americans in the UK's weird morality, and that's the Saranga Conundrum is really, really boring. Overlit corridor surfing like it's 1982 again. Considering Chibnall's criticisms of 80s Doctor Who, this is the most 80s Doctor Who thing outside the 80s. overlit corridors, running around, a really stupid looking monster, an overly packed TARDIS team. Why? The dullest guest cast ever. I'm going to say that again for Orphan 55, but really, this is embarrassingly dull. The only good character is the one who challenges the Doctor and finally tells her that she's being selfish. And then he gets killed, and we move on with Mabley and the rest of the hang-ons. We spend like 10 minutes of the plot removing ourselves from the action to focus on a man having a baby and Ryan and Graham being really awkward playing, and that being played for laughs. We're being told that the Bating is this massive threat. Apart from one, it looks pathetic, and yes, the adipose look cute as well, but they were supposed to be. They weren't supposed to be a threat in terms of, oh no, the adipose are going to get us, whereas the Bating is. And you cannot pretend that thing is like one of the most dangerous creatures in the universe and then have Yaz drop kick it. You cannot do that. They do not correlate, and then they just don't kill the Bating. They just chuck it out so some other ship can get invaded and all brutally murdered by it. It's a weird one. I just, really, really boring episode. And sometimes that is the biggest crime that can be committed. Demons of the Punjab, great. Honestly, this is easily the best episode of Series 11. When I watched it again, I was just reminded just how sublimely written this whole plot is. Ryan is a bit of a hang-on, but Yaz has done really well. It's the best characterization of Yaz in the entirety of Series 11. It's the best characterization of Graham in the entirety of Series 11. And it's the best characterization of the 13th Doctor in the entirety of Series 11. Because she's quite reined back and restrained. She still has her quirks, but it's not quite as overbearing and annoying as could sometimes come off in episodes like Arachnids in the UK, for example. Historical episodes set in a time that a lot of people don't know anything about, including myself when I originally watched it, but it made me want to look into the partition of India. It's educated, it deals with actual complex issues. I so often this era just fell into doing political stories that are just basic political messaging. Rosa is racism bad, Orphan 55 is global warming bad, Praxis is plastics bad. There is nothing interesting to be said about those subjects. Radicalization, on the other hand, is a complex, deep-rooted issue, and it actually explores that in a very good way. The guest cast are on top form. There's a lot of brilliant stuff that's being done throughout this entire episode with them. It's emotional. The final scene with Prim's death is really, really well done. I love how they emphasize that this is not some government. This is ordinary people radicalized to this point. And, you know, the extra little details such as Prim going, I know you, I fought with you. This is not what we fought for. We did not fight for this. You know, we didn't change when a line was drawn, but we did. And that shot of the gun and then the sunlight blinds it out is just so well done. And then that scene with the Thajarian, so when they throw his head up, not actually throw his head up, that sounds really weird. The image of his head, and they pass it up, and it's all among the unmourned millions of the dead of partition, is such a beautiful moment. I was nearly moved to tears by it. It's such a well-written episode. Every character gets great moments. Every character is full of the best stuff that they've done in this entire era. This is a really well-written script. The score from Akinola is gorgeous, and I love the Indian-infused Doctor Who closing credits. They're just so gorgeous, and I want to go listen to them now, just thinking about them. I love this episode. I really do, and it's one of those episodes that keeps me invested, even if this era sometimes can really hack me off, and we haven't even scratched the surface with that hacking off yet, because the two worst episodes of this era are still to come, somehow. But when this era scores like this, it's just such a beautiful thing to see. Oh, I love it so much. I wouldn't quite put it an absolute classic. Actually, there are a few from the great column in this that I considered, oh, should I put it an absolute classic? But then I thought, oh, I didn't put Silence in the Library in absolute classic, so I can't, in good consciousness, put these stories. But I do think it's a phenomenal piece of TV. Really, really brilliant stuff. Kablam! Okay, better than The Woman Who Fell to Earth. Honestly, the most Doctor Who feeling story in Series 11, a series that did not, for the large part, feel anything like Doctor Who used to feel like, was this one did. The score was pretty front and center compared to other episodes. The companions all had stuff to do, and it was just a very Doctor Who in terms of there's a lot more action, there was a lot more running about, there was a lot of stuff like that. But the messaging got totally butchered on the way, and they build up this really interesting society, this depiction of a society. Now, I've just read 1984 by George Orwell. I finished it for the first time a couple of days ago, which just adds another layer of frustration to the fact that they build up this idea of this society that where the workers are spied on by these robots, where they have their conversations monitored, they're listening in all the time, and only 10% of the workers are actual people, but there's automation that deals with all these complex issues and then decides to side with the system. I would love to get rid of these adverts, but they're always here and it's perfect. Look who is Amazon. And Kablam is a pretty obvious Amazon comparison. Sod Amazon. It's a pretty obvious Amazon comparison and parody. And then it sides with the corporations at the end. And it tells the guy, Charlie, that he's the one in the wrong and he's the one without a conscience, but the system has a conscience. That is what we're told. The system is not the problem. The system has a conscience. Why would you side with that? Why would you? How was this a year on from Oxygen? How did we go from utter unrestrained evil capitalism to, oh, actually capitalism is fine and it has a conscience and it cares about its workers and it cares about its... And then to release that episode on the weekend of Black Friday. The corporation's actually good. It was going so well, and then they just totally screwed it at the end. Lee Mack's fun. I enjoy Lee Mack, but he should have been more in the episode. The Witchfinders. Again, almost, I feel like from Series 11 here, these two little ones, they are reserved for, these are the terrible ones, these are the boring ones. The Witchfinders is just really boring. Alan Cumming's good fun, but most of the episode is just really, really, really slow. And putting the first ever female Doctor in her first series into the historical setting of the witch trials just feels like such an obvious thing to do. And then she gets tried as a witch. And it's like, oh, who could possibly have seen that completely unforeseeable plot twist coming? Like, seriously, why? Boring side cast. The woman who plays Becca Savage is brilliant. Alan Cummings is great as King James, and I love his banter with Ryan and Graham. 13 and Yaz are just kind of there. I like 13's interactions with King James, but honestly, the messaging again is just too overt. There are episodes that have dealt with sexism in a much better way than this. And as much as I enjoyed seeing 13 just being a little bit put out by now being a woman and not being able to do stuff in these historical settings, after a while it just got a bit, she was every single thing. She was like, if I was a man, I could do whatever I want now. It's like, can we just actually have a plot? And there's no action in this whole episode. And honestly, the ending is putting it below Ghost Monument on the basis of that alone. There was this thing in Series 11 where they just... And I don't know if there was any good reasoning for this, but they have someone do something at the end of the plot. They have that guy kick Simshaw off the crane at the end of Woman Who Fell to Earth, or Jack Robinson shooting the giant spider. And in this case, the Morlach's being defeated by King James throwing the fire, where they come up with a plot resolution and go, it doesn't seem very Doctor-like to do that. So they have someone else do it and solve the plot and save the episode, and then the Doctor tell them off for doing it and going in a sulk because they're not being as moral as they should be. And it's so fast. The plot resolves in about 10 seconds. He just goes, burn the witch! And then, that's flipping it. Come back next week. Might have a more interesting story for you. We do have a more interesting story for you. It takes you away, which is okay, and I quite enjoy. It's one of the better ones of this series, without question, for me. Fun idea box, probably way too many ideas. Nice stuff done with Graham and Ryan. Yaz again is just sort of background. Series 11 sort of went into did that a little bit too often, you could argue. 13th Doctor gets one of her first defining moments when she talks to the Solitrack. Solitrack's an interesting idea, but it didn't really need to come in the form of a frog. Like, I like the big weird ideas. I don't even mind the frog, but I feel like they could have come up with something better. Even if he just come as Grace, or has come as, I don't know, anything else that wouldn't have seemed as weird, or if we'd not seen what the universe looked like that she did, I think that would be much more effective. Also, the actress who plays Hannah, I don't think she can act. Really poor performance. I know that's harsh to say, but child acting is hit and miss. Even teenage acting is hit and miss, and this one is miss. And as good as the stuff between Ryan and Graham is at the end, it feels one episode too early, because it means that their dynamic is kind of sorted going into the dullest finale imaginable. The Battle of Ranskur of Kolos. Names that just roll off your tongue, eh, Chibs? Roll off the tongue. Why? This was just so boring. I watched it when I came back. I've been out pretty much all night, and I watched it at like midnight. I was really bored the whole time. My memories of it were totally well served. They wasted Mark Addy. The finale was dull. There was no escalation of stakes throughout the entire final act. The pacing was off. The Uggs were a dull invention. The planet was just another time that we actually managed to go off wild. Series 11 did that. It actually went to alien planets. And every time we went to an alien planet, it was a barren wasteland. What's the point? Can we have an alien culture, please? We've still not seen this TARDIS team have to deal with any planets with aliens that are actually aliens on them. Simshai is not a finale level villain, and it kind of amuses me that 13th Doctor was like, oh no, I know that voice, as if, oh no, it's the big bad. I was like, you defeated him like he was nothing last time. He was easy, and you were regenerating at the time. Why is he suddenly... Then they try and up the stakes halfway through with that, and now he's going to destroy the Earth. And I'm just like, can he not have just been threatening other planets? Can he not just be abusing these people, the Uggs, and that's why you're trying to get rid of him? Can we give Mark Addy, a brilliant actor, something to actually do? This just feels so flat. Even Graham, Bradley Walsh plays it well, but even Graham threatening to kill Simshar, you just know this era hasn't got the balls to do that, to actually let their companion do it. So it is of no threat. And the 13th Doctor saying, if you kill Simshar, then you can't travel with me. Like, you let Ryan murder Krasko, and you didn't. Her morality just changes week to week, and it's really frustrating, and there's no consistency whatsoever. Let's go talk about something good. Resolution's great. It was never threatening the absolute classic tier, which Demons of the Punjab and one of the Series 12 episodes were, I was considering putting an absolute classic, but actually there's not going to be anything an absolute classic, just for the records. But there was Demons of the Punjab and one episode of Series 12 that I was going to put in absolute classic, but Resolution was always just pushing from good to great. I really enjoy Resolution. First time in this era that the score feels like it's at front and center. The body horror with the Daleks, it's not really a cold open because there isn't actually an opening credit sequence, but the sequence that has the Dalek lore about the custodians and the battle that they're talking about. Great stuff. It's a couple of nitpicks that really drag it down. The microwave resolution, the Wi-Fi joke, and the abolition of unit. Other than that, Charlotte Ritchie's Lynn and her friend Mitch make for a really great addition to the TARDIS team in an era where they often just pick up lots of hangers-on who just hang about for an episode and don't really do anything. They actually are a really great and memorable pairing. arguably more so than the companions. They do some good stuff with Ryan and his dad. I really like a lot of the interactions. The 13th Doctor gets to face up against the Dalek. Honestly, for me, it's important that a Doctor faces off against a big villain fairly early on. And it didn't help the 13th Doctor that her first series had no recurring villains. Because we got to see Eccleston versus a Dalek pretty early on, or the 10th Doctor versus Cybermen. Capaldi got a second episode against Daleks. Matt Smith got a third episode with Daleks. So it feels like it's taken too long, but seeing her really become the Doctor, also that scarf, I've got to say about that scarf, she should wear that all the time. It looks much better than her actual normal outfit. I really enjoy this one. Sagan Akinola's Dalek theme is great when they actually use it. Looking at You, Revolution of the Daleks, which made the Dalek theme so much less important, but the big drum-heavy theme is great. I think this is the vastly superior Dalek action, possibly the best Dalek action we've seen since the Stolen Earth Journey's end, with the Dalek just outright butchering these bunch of army guys. I think it's a really great story, very good New Year's special, and really should have been the finale to series 11 because, well, this thing sure as hell shouldn't have been. Spyfall Part 1, great, fun, good, it's going good. Really just an absolute joy of 55 minutes of spy parody, good fun, interesting ideas. The Casavan, Lenny Henry, the Master reveal at the end, a top-notch cliffhanger. Loads of ideas that it can't really pay off because there's so many of them. But honestly, after series 11, I was in a slightly depressed mood about the state of the show. Resolution made me think maybe Chris Chibnall can salvage this. And then after Spyfall Part 1, I was like, the Madman is actually going to salvage this era. The rest of series 12 didn't live up to that whatsoever. But I really did enjoy Spyfall Part 1. I think it's one of Akinola's best musical scores. He embraces the spy prestige. It actually moves at a decent pace. It totally wastes Stephen Fry. It has its problems, but I really enjoy this as a first part. It's also the first of two partners that we've had in this era so far, both of which have a very good first part, and both of which totally fall apart in the second part. Spyfall Part 2 is bad. I feel like that's controversial. The Who Addicts, who was a Doctor Who channel I really, really like, when they did, they put 2 Jodie Whittaker episodes in their greatest ever series. So they said that Spyfall Part 2 is the best episode 2 of any series ever, and I just can't even begin to agree. I think it's a total and utter mess. With hindsight, the Master coming into the story at the end of Part 1 derails the entire thing because Lenny Henry's Barton just gets put in the back burner. We have the Casavan, they get put in the back burner for the Master, where they sort of just run around history for a bit and have a bit of a showdown for a bit of time. I think it's Sash Dhawan's best performance. I think he is easily probably the best part of the episode, but so many of the things that you cannot resolve the entire episode's plot off screen. You cannot have 3 villains and not establish what any of their motivations for doing what they're doing actually is. You cannot ignore the dodgy morality of the 13th Doctor weaponizing the Master's race against him, against the Nazis, by saying, I've changed your perception filter, now they'll see you as an Asian man and you're going to get locked up. Just baffling. And why introduce the historical figures like Nur and Yat Khan if you're not going to actually deal with them as people? That just felt like total, hey, look, famous women across history, but without any actual substance added to them. With what I love about a lot of the historical stories in previous eras is they have dealt with how these historical figures have ended, what their lives. We learnt about Madame de Pompadour dying young and Charles Dickens dying young, and we learnt about Shakespeare's son and Vincent van Gogh. We particularly looked at his future and the fact that he still killed himself and that his end was still tragic. And here we have a character who dies in a Nazi prison camp and nothing. Absolutely. In fact, the 13th Doctor just wipes her head off of, wipes her mind, removing any of the traces of nice things, that, the future isn't going to be won by the fascists, and that her life will not be given for nothing. It just actually wipes the information out of her head. And the fact that we go to an amazing location, amazing looking location, like World War II Nazi-occupied Paris, and it's just a background for the Master and Doctor having a chat. It's such a frustrating plot with no direction, no restraint, and a plot resolution that takes place off screen. The Doctor just went back in time and messed around with the Master's machine before he could use it. Can we not just do that every week? Can we not just go back in time and change things that already are established into the... even the resolution to the cliffhanger feels weak. And I really do not like this story. I think it really, really loses me hard, and it loses its own spy tone, and it wants to become this big epic, and I really, really hate the redestruction of Gallifrey. It makes the 50th cheapened, it changes the entire motivation of the character of the Doctor, and the fact that the Master was able to do that, no way do I buy that. No way do I buy that the Master, who was this renegade that the Time Lords knew was about, but never even bothered to stop him from trying to destroy the universe because they just thought he was so pathetic and such a non-entity, could have destroyed Gallifrey and destroyed it in a way not to damage the body so we could keep them for Cybermen. That's not this episode's problem. That's not... Oh dear. Orphan 55 is Doctor Who as a pathetic pantomime. They're just there on a holiday. First of all, Graham collects a load of tickets for a free holiday. Mate, you have a TARDIS. You're not need to collect coupons for a free holiday. Every day is a free holiday. Why are you going to a spa planet when you can just go to a beach anywhere? But no, you're going to go indoors and sunbathe on some hypertonic... Never mind. Never mind that point. There's so much bigger fish to fry here. The most overt and poorly done political messaging I have ever witnessed on screen. The Doctor almost turns to camera and gives a speech about global warming. It ends by saying, "You need to change," and then it cuts to the dregs. Oh, why would you do this, Mr. Heim? Why would you let this happen, Mr. Chibnall? Oh, and the romance between Ryan and Bella, is that her name? The girl? Oh man alive. Are we supposed to care? Does anybody care? Why does the cat person look so pathetic? It looks like they could have done better effect in the 70s than they were doing there. This is Doctor Who on its biggest ever budget, and it looks flipping pathetic. Benny! Oh, shut up, you old woman, would you just die already? Oh, they are in a safe place, and they go, you know what, let's get in this bus and drive out into where the dregs live to find a guy who's clearly already flipping dead. And what do you know? They get stuck and immediately regret their decision. It's a pathetic pantomime with absolutely no redeeming qualities whatsoever, and a political messaging which is so overt, a twist which is so dull. It was Earth. It could have worked as well. The messaging would have worked as well with any other planet, and it wouldn't have felt so much like getting slapped around the face. Also, Bella is a terrorist, and Ryan has a romance with her, and it's okay that she's a terrorist because she's got issues with her mum. Well, it wasn't okay that Charlie was a terrorist. He was a horrible person, even though he was fighting against a corrupt system and he believed what he was doing was for the greater good. But Bella's revenge mission is just a symptomatic of her having mummy issues, so that's fine. What? Oh, such a dull guest cast as well. Why waste James Buckler like this flipping episode? Oh. Nicholas Tess's Night of Terror, good. Honestly, I needed it after what I just watched in Spyfall Part 2 and Orphan 55. Fun, bonkers, historical, Skithra are pretty good. I like how they supposed to represent Thomas Edison. as these creatures who take others' inventions as their own. I think Goran Visnich does I don't know if that's his name, does a really brilliant performance as Nikola Tesla. 13th Doctor is actually really good in this one. Yaz has some decent stuff to do, as does Graham. As with all of Series 12, Ryan is just a spectator standing gawping from the sidelines at this. But it's good fun. I really enjoy this one. The historical setting is very well realised. It looks gorgeous. Some really good cinematography. And although most of the musical score is really kind of forgettable, the music when they go into the Skithra lair is really unsettling and, yeah, just a really unnatural piece of music. And I kind of really like that. And I like the whole vibe of this episode. I don't know how to say vibe. I've been watching too much 13th Doctor, honestly. But I do. I really like the feel and the tone of this one. And as I said, this era, you know, as you can see with the good ones, we've got historical episodes are the strength of this era, other than this. And they should 100% do more stories like this. It was just great to see Tesla on screen, and it was great to see the historical figure done justice, and then to actually deal with the end of his life, unlike they did it with Nurul Khan. They don't wipe his mind with all the things he's seen because he's an inventor. They just let him live, and they say, you know, his story's going to end the same, and it's going to end in a very negative place. Stupid name for an episode, though. Not exactly catchy, but memorable because it's so weird. Fugitive of the Jedu. Oh, there's a controversial. This is the other one that the Who addicts had on their best ever series. They said this was the best episode 5 of all time, and this is not even in the top half. One second. This is just not a good story whatsoever, in my opinion. It doesn't have a plot. And on original broadcast, I kind of got caught up in the excitement of the twists and the turns and the shock return of Jack. But in hindsight, as good as that return of Jack is, and as much as I celebrated like a madman, it kind of is totally pointless. It would be the equivalent of Sarah Jane rocking up mid-series 3 and just going, hey, Martha, watch out for Harold Saxon. He'll come up later. He just turns up and delivers some arc service and then sods off again. He has no purpose to the plot whatsoever. And if they make it canon that Jo Martin is the 14th Doctor, I will probably have a lot more love for the story, but I hate the idea of pre-Hartnell Doctors. And when she digs up the police box, which if it was a pre-Hartnell Doctor, it would not be a police box, I groaned because I'd seen the rumor that the Timeless Child was going to be a bunch of pre-Hartnell Doctors, and I was like, really didn't want them to do that. And honestly, I really don't like the twist. And honestly, this whole episode just doesn't have a plot. It is a series of shocks and twists that goes nowhere. I would have happily just had a plot with some Jedu in Gloucester trying to find a fugitive, and if they happen to be a Gallifreyan, that would be quite a cool little detail. But honestly, this just feels like this feels desperate. This feels like come on, it's the mid-season, dragging our viewers in, trying to keep them hooked. Whereas I would much rather have just had a filler episode. I did enjoy this one upon original broadcast, but it falls down upon rewatch because you can really see the flaws glaring at you. But on the opposite note, I did not enjoy Praxis the first time round, and I actually think it's okay. It looks gorgeous. It's brightly lit. I don't mean brightly lit in the overlit Saranga Conundrum way. Lots of beautiful purples and greens and colours everywhere, which compared to Fugitive the Jedu, which was just filmed in the dark with a green grading screen over it, and it just looks so gorgeous by comparison. Jake and Adam is that their names? Jake and Adam. That sounds about right. They're pretty good cast, although totally wasted Matthew McNulty in that role. The plastics messaging is not subtle, but it's nowhere near as bad as Orphan 55. In fact, it feels really subtle by comparison to Orphan 55. The 13th Doctor is good. All the companions are actually pretty decent. I really wish we didn't have Gabriella because she's of no value to the story whatsoever. The hopping around the world, which is just a Chibnall trope at this point, you know, with having like 3 or 4 different locations going on at once, it feels a little bit pointless, but it does look good, so you can kind of forgive it. I actually think this one is okay and slightly overhated, and overhated by me. And it's one of the ones, like Rosa, that I have slightly reappraised and thought, you know what, that's better than I originally gave it credit for. It's not amazing by any stretch, and it has its very glaring problems, but I do enjoy this one. Another one that I think has gone down in my estimations is Can You Hear Me? Which I think is bad. Oh dear, these are all controversial opinions. I know a lot of people love this one. I just can't. I just can't get with it. It's the problems are all very fundamental to the actual plot mechanics themselves. I love Zelen, but then when they introduce the fact that Zelen's not the real villain, but actually this other crazy woman, I don't enjoy that as a twist. I don't enjoy the Doctor or Ryan's dream sequences. The Doctor's is just blatant arc service, and Ryan's just feels weak into what is supposedly leading to him leaving the TARDIS, but it just kind of doesn't work on any level. Graham is, I do enjoy Graham and Yaz and the backstory done with them, but I really think that the biggest problem with this episode, other than that scene at the end when the 13th Doctor says, I'm still socially awkward, and basically just totally ignores Graham when he tries to talk to her about his cancer, which kind of undermines the messaging of the episodes, because they have this whole thing about talking about it and the importance of talking about issues, and then have an entire bit where she just doesn't know what to say and doesn't help him at all. I feel like I know what they were trying to go for with that scene, but it could have been done better. The reason that this has gone down in my estimations is because the Eternals, I've watched Classic Who now. The Eternals are such a massive concept. They should be difficult to defeat, but they're easy. They're so easy. The Doctor just waves a sonic and honestly resolves the plot within about 20 odd seconds. She defeats gods like they're nothing. There is no sense of scale or stakes. And honestly, this is just a knockoff of a vastly superior Sarah Jane Adventure story called The Nightmare Man. And just watch The Nightmare Man if you want to watch a creepy story about dream sequences that give our companions development, because at least that one has a good ending. At least, you can't face a god and just defeat them like that. I wanted this era to finally feel big and finally feel like we were in danger, but we didn't. It just felt too easy. And again, we've got another random character that we just pick up in the TARDIS for no reason. Loads of them, actually. I like some of the stuff in this episode, and it's an episode that I appreciate what it was trying to do, but you cannot have an ending that weak on villains with that big promise and expect me to be okay with that, because that's just not going to happen. How far? Haunting of Villa Diodati was the one that I very, very genuinely consider putting an absolute classic. But I've gone for great, because, as I said, I did not put Silence in the Library Forest of the Dead in absolute classic. And do I think it's better than that episode? No, not really. But this is my absolute favourite 13th Doctor story, easily. Gorgeously written by Max Knowledge, very funny, scary, creepy, great tone, a lack of music that really helps, and Akena's music really helps create an ambience in this one. A sort of a tone and a feeling and of genuine horror, and it's very good as a haunted house story, and then halfway through it shifts in tone to the Lone Sideman, and I love Ashad as the Lone Sideman. I think he's such a creepy, well-designed, well-performed villain. I think it's the best guest cast that we've had in this era. Have I said that already? Possibly. Possibly just because they were a real historical people that they were building on, even down to the butler, Fletcher. He was a real historical figure who does not die. So does he die here? I'm just going to assume that he's just knocked out. But really interesting characters. The only reason that it's not an absolute classic is that when 13 gives her big speech, which for me is her defining moment as the Doctor, the reason why she saves Percy Shelley should not be because words matter and because he was a good poet. It should be because we do not trade lives, and since when do we make those decisions? We will save everyone. But I love that she's just out of her depth. You know what I said about Can You Hear Me feeling like she was totally in control of these gods? This is 13th Doctor totally out of her depth. Was that part of the plan? Yes, a big plan to save Shelley. That was step one, give the Siberium to the lone Cyberman. Okay, what's step two? Fix the mess I made in step one. The tone, the filming, the cinematography, the blue lights coming through the windows, it honestly looked gorgeous. And the final moments of this episode are probably, I get chills watching those final moments when he's Lord Byron's reading that poem, and then it's darkness had no aid from her. She was the universe, and it shows 13. It's such a phenomenal moment. And this is, for me, easily the best 13th Doctor story, even better than Demons of the Punjab. Such a great story, and it's the one 13th Doctor episode that I've actually just totally randomly, not in a rewatch, not in anything, I just sat down and went, you know what episode I want to watch today is The Haunting of Viadiyadati. Such a brilliant episode. And Maxine Alderton, please come back for Series 13. Such a brilliantly done script. So good. I really love this one. Ascension of the Cybermen. Don't know why I sang that. Good. I really quite like Ascension of the Cybermen, which is really frustrating given what the second part is and what it does with all of the threads that are set up here. But this is the first time in this era that I feel really that the companions could just die. They feel under real threat and pressure. There's a decent pace that keeps us throughout the whole episode. The lone Cyberman, Ashad, is great. We get a bit of his backstory, which I like. But again, it's totally wasted in the next episode, which I'm going to rant. And I need more juice because I'm going to lose my voice in the anger of the Timeless Children. I really like Ascension of the Cybermen, but again, it's a good first part like Spyfall Part 1. In fact, no. Should I put in good? Okay, that's where I was meant to put it, not good. It's a good first part, just like Spyfall Part 1. But again, it has a cliffhanger, which is the Master enters the plot, and then suddenly in the second part, that has totally derailed the entire episode. The Timeless Children is the worst piece of Doctor Who ever. I think it's twice as bad as Orphan 55. I think it's unforgivable as a script. It is abominably written, right? So the original thing that's got to be mentioned is I hate the Timeless Child as an idea, as a concept, but a lot of people do. But a lot of people I've also seen defending it and going, well, other than the Timeless Child stuff, it was pretty good. No, it wasn't. Not a chance, was it? It was awful. We've set up this big Cybermen epic with these new, really good-looking Cybermen led by Ashad, who is easily the most compelling villain of Chibnall's era so far. And everything is put to the background so we can spend 30 minutes in the Matrix with Master really slowly narrating the entire history of the Timeless Child and Gallifrey, and watching Gallifrey be built from the bottom up. And you cannot demystify Gallifrey like that. And we go round Gallifrey, and the Master is so pathetic in the story. I loved him in Spyfall Part 2, but he was so annoying and camp. And you cannot be dark and camp simultaneously. It does not work. It just doesn't. And this whole thing, Ashad is the greatest villain this era has, and they kill him like that after not focusing on him whatsoever. There's a big Cyberman army, and we can't be dealing with them, so we just blow them up. And they have the Cyber Time Lords who look pathetically stupid. We have, I just totally lost my chain of thought there because I was so annoyed. The Cyber Time Lords look pathetically stupid. And the ending where the Doctor says, I started this mess with Shelley and the Cybermen. I have to finish it. And then she walks in, and they literally rip off that scene from Parting of the Ways where she looks at the button. And what does she do? Someone else walks in, takes the button off her, and finishes it so she doesn't have to deal with any of the consequences of her own actions that we've been setting up for the past 2 episodes. I assumed when she didn't want to press the button was that she didn't want to destroy all life on Gallifrey, but it turns out that someone else will take it, she'll run off, and all she ever cared about was herself. Oh, why did you write this, Chibnall? Why did you write it this way? Why did you destroy 2 episodes of great setup and not deal with anything? Why did you write the most stupid, pointless, overpowering story arc, backstory into the Doctor? Why did you make it? It's not that it's just awful. It's also an awful story presented in the most boring manner possible. We just get talked at, and then suddenly everything happens and the Doctor just walks out unscathed from the entire plot while someone else solves it for us. I despise this episode with a burning passion. And by Revolution of the Daleks, it's okay. The prison cliffhanger goes nowhere. I feel like that was a massive tone shift. We waited for a long time for this. The prison cliffhanger went nowhere, and that really disappointed me and honestly coloured my view of the entire episode. There's a lot going on here, but it's not really properly developed, in my opinion. It should have been done better. Jack's return, unfortunately, it's probably going to be the last ever appearance of Jack, and it feels like an underwhelming end for his character, largely because it wasn't meant to be. Ryan and Graham's exit's okay. Honestly, this episode's just okay in the extreme. There's some good Dalek action, but most of the Dalek stuff takes place off screen. There's some really annoying stuff like the 4 minutes to a Saka scene, and I really wanted the companions to have to deal without the Doctor, and I really wanted the Doctor to feel like she'd been in prison. You know, you can tell us that she's been in prison for decades, but if it's like 10 minutes on screen, it means nothing. It means absolutely nothing. This just disappointed me. I wanted the prison cliffhanger and the length of time she'd spent in prison to really change this Doctor, but she literally just came out and was like, all right, fam, I've been in space jail. And I'm just like, oh, for the love of all. It was decent in its when it was actually focused on what it was doing, when it went into body horror aspects, when it went into the Daleks, when it went into all these things, it was pretty good. But overall, this feels like it should have been one of the best stories of the Chibnall era, and it just flattened out. I feel really dejected after talking about Timeless Children. Maybe it's better than I'm giving it credit for now. It's okay. I think it's pretty good in parts, but I just cannot muster the strength to talk about anything in a positive manner after the Timeless Children. So that's the end of 12 videos worth of me jabbering about episodes, and for way too long. I hope to do Torchwood. I hope to do Sarah Jane Adventures, maybe Class as well. So it's maybe not the very end of this series of these tier list videos, but it is the end of the doing each Doctor one at a time, and ending with probably the most divisive era of all. So yeah, thank you very much for watching these videos, particularly if you've watched all of them, and I will see you hopefully again soon, where I plan to do some more video essays, maybe another one about the Timeless Child, but I think I'd be too angry to even write that. Goodbye.